Well, first of all, I am Eric Clausen, and I own Rotor Village. That keeps me up at night and busy in the day. So, um, yeah, if you had guys have any specific questions or things I'm not clear on, just holler, let me know. And yeah, I will answer anything and everything that I can. So the gist of what you're wanting is basically how to choose parts for drone racing, correct?
Well, for a beginner who's never raced say they've never flown a drone, or we've flown GPS drones and we don't know much about where to go with regards to racing.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll start right at the beginning. Basically, you could boil racing down into like two main groups. So there's like the tiny whoop group is what it's called, and that is indoor racing. So typically in winter, that's what a lot of people will be doing. So that's this kind of thing. Really, really small setups where they're pretty agile, and I don't know how well this video is showing up on your end. Might be really jittery, but it's always
Great.
one YouTube search away. But yeah, that's generally tiny whip racing, and these are all sub 250, so you don't need to jump through any hoops. You just plug in your battery and off you go. And then so it ranges all the way from this to the outdoor 5-inch racing, which is a little bit faster. And this video is not sped up. This is real time. I don't know how they can manage to do this. My brain can't even, yeah, I would be lost.
Yeah. Wild.
So so it has quite the range, you could say. But yeah, this is actually the fastest racer in the world. I mean, at the moment. And yeah, it sure shows. So quite the spread on what racing is in FPV. And this would be a larger 5-inch setup, so it would be above that 250 gram mark. And depending, like, there's some clubs that have like a Mac. Can't think of the word now. Basically, a Mac membership. That was the word, and that basically bypasses like a license. That being said, that is in a state of flux and changing. So, sorry, did I miss something?
No, it's just adding on to what you're saying. It creates like a mini aerodrome where you don't need an R pass.
Pretty much, yep.
Our local RC group got nailed, and they all have to get R passes now too.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Hopefully they get something better going for that in the future. But anywho, so hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of what FPV and racing even looks like. So yeah, sub 250, like the tiny whip class, and 5-inch. And there's a few different approaches you can take to it, and you kind of just need to have your systems talk to one another. So we can just start off by looking at different video systems. And sorry if my visuals are very boring. It was either I can put myself on the screen and then you just have to look at my face, or things that might actually be useful. So we're gonna go with that one. But yeah, so there is analog and digital. Digital, there's a few different versions of it. I guess you guys would be used to the digital using the Avata stuff.
Yeah.
So that'll be familiar to you. So typically with racing, people will be using an analog setup. So something like The transporters would be like the cheapest way of getting into it. As I'm saying this, I'm like, oh, but if you there's that and there's that and there's that. It's very or can be very technical, but I'll try and boil it down and make it as easy as possible. And then there's also HD0, which is like a new digital system,
This is for the drone.
which
Sorry, one word, but when the drone. But we're just having more.
which is like low latency, the same as analog. So yeah, I'll just kind of gloss over that for now. And then there would be the DJI and Avatar systems. And typically that's not used too much for racing, or at least at the like higher levels, or even if it's a league kind of thing. Just because of weight and latency and that kind of thing. Now, that being said, if you're just wanting to go out and fly and have fun, the DJI stuff is absolutely fantastic and the latency isn't an issue at all. But the crazy guys that are doing this kind of a thing will feel a few milliseconds of latency. So that's kind of why it is the way that it is. But yeah, so you want to start off by picking a video system, what you're going to want to go with. Analog's the cheapest to get into, and all the digital options are more expensive and can be a little bit harder to find components, especially HD0, but DJI and Avatar are fairly comparable and readily available as well. So yeah, once you've got that, then you're going to want to choose a RF system, which will basically you're talking to your drone at that point. So for this kind of thing, it used to be that everyone would use a system called Crossfire. At this point, most people have switched to Express LRS. It's open source, and so everything's pretty cheap and readily available, and the system itself is fantastic to use. And it also is very, very low latency with extremely good range. So both things that are good when flying a drone.
How far range?
That is a great question. So the guys that have been testing that system on their wings, so not a typical drone, but like a flying wing, they are getting like 30, 40 kilometers. And I think they set a new record like just the other day. But the range is insane. And the receiver that they're doing it with is like the size of my thumbnail. So it is very, very impressive. And then you rewind like 5 years, and if you would make it like a kilometer and back, then it's like, oh yeah, success, right? But yeah, the times have definitely changed a little bit. So yeah, the range is absolutely fantastic. And any of the modern systems really will give you that range. So by modern systems, it's basically, well, I'll just reference it here since you can see that. Any of these except for, I can't do that, except for those two. Ignore those two. And the rest of these will have all the range you could ever hope and dream for 99% of flying. Yeah, so controllers range anywhere from, up to 5, 6, I don't even have that one. So like in the 500s down to under $100, but it's out of stock. There's always more coming. So yeah, it's fairly easy and cheap to get something that runs Express LRS, and it's a good, reliable system. But yeah, the important thing is that the systems talk to each other. So the video system, you're going to want to have goggles that talk to your video transmitter or air unit if you're using like a DJI system. And same with the RF system, you're going to want a controller that will talk to your receiver. So Express LRS compatible controller would talk to an Express LRS receiver, basically. So you wouldn't want to mix and match any of that kind of stuff. And then over to the drone side of things, which is a little more exciting. So probably this would be more so something you guys would be looking at if you're wanting to do like indoor flying. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a great starting point for price too.
Yeah, it's really easy to get into and cheap to get into. So yeah, and these are absolutely fantastic for any kind of indoor flying, and they're super agile and quick. And that would be basically what this is what the guys are flying here.
Nice.
So yeah, they perform good, and all of these parts you can get separately too. So if people want to build their own, you can do that. A lot of the guys that are like really into it, they'll like pick their frame and pick their motors and build it the way they want it. But you can just get that and call it good too. And if you're going to be racing indoors, you're going to want some gates like they were showing in the video.
Yes.
So you can use whatever you want. You can hang a bed sheet from the ceiling, or have something like this. But
I'll buy a whole bunch of gates up here.
okay, sounds good. Yeah, and if people are like, summer's around the corner, it's getting warmer. If people are wanting to go more the bigger class of drone that is going to be hauling at a high rate of speed outdoors, yeah, so you'd be after a 5-inch outdoor drone. And when I say 5-inch, that refers to the size of the props used. I don't know why I don't know why we use that, but that's the naming mechanism that's been chosen apparently. So yeah, something like this is ready to go. It has the Express OS system in it, so you know that your control link is always going to be good. And most people, when they're doing the bigger thing like this, they'll build it from the ground up. But again, here you can start with something that is all good and done.
Eric, when you
Yep.
buy one of these that's all good and done, so do you just pick any of those visual systems, any of the RCs, any of the controllers? And you just, or is there
You
little
would
things you have to do?
you would get the compatible ones. So this is an analog. This one specifically is an analog setup. So what that means is that the video receiver on the drone runs an analog system. So this over here is one of the digital ones. So it's fairly good video, where these are the analog. So you can see like there's these static blips in the video feeds, and that is just part of that analog world. So in this case, you would want to get analog goggles that could talk to that receiver, and then an Express LRS controller that can talk to the control receiver. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And then I guess the other thing would be is the battery that you're running would always need to be something roughly compatible. And there is some preference on what guys will run, but in this case, it would be a larger 6S battery, whereas I lost that one now. Whereas the smaller setup like this, it actually includes these tiny little batteries with it, as well as, there it is. So it has a tiny, basically a USB charger. So what you would only need to be adding to this would be goggles and a controller, and you're good to go. Yeah, and then for those that would want to go ahead and build something themselves, like I was saying, you can build this from the ground up too. There's the frame for it and a bunch of motor options as well. But yeah, that in a very, very tiny shell is drone racing and how to choose kind of what you're after. Now, please ask me questions on all the gaps that I have missed.
This last kit that you showed us, is that the best one for someone who needs to learn how to fly manually? Like it can crash into walls and it's pretty decent?
Yeah, it'll do fairly decent with that. It's because it's so light, they can take a decent amount of abuse. And the other benefit is because it's just a tiny little plastic frame. If you break it, it's not a huge deal. You spend, what was it? I just looked at it. You spend $7 and you have another frame. So like, yeah, doesn't matter.
Is that a digital system?
No, this is also an analog system. Here, let me show you some other options as well. I actually just redid these categories today, so it's a little easier to follow. So if somebody was just like, I just want a box that I can take all of my things out and fly, and I don't want to think about goggles and a controller and all these things, then yeah. Then yeah, this is the place to stop. There's a lot of these showings out of stock right now. Yeah, as the weather warms up, these tend to fly out of the building, pun intended. But yeah, these are all on their way as well if they are showing out of stock. But basically, let me think which one has been the most popular. Probably one of these two. That being said, that one is definitely better, even though it's a bit more money. But so yeah, what you get here, it's a very, very basic setup, and there's pros and cons to going this route. The pro is you get everything you need. You don't have to like figure out the compatibility thing because you know it all is going to talk to each other and be fine. So it's very easy to get started. The downside is you're going to love it and you're going to get very, very addicted. And then you're going to go, well, I don't like this radio and I don't like these goggles. I want something that's way better and like high end. So at that point, you probably are going to want to replace the goggles and the controller. That's what I tend to see happen. But yeah, it's a great way just to get one box, take out all your stuff, and go fly.
And that one's manual too, right? It's not GPS. There's no writing of itself. You have to throttle and stuff.
Correct. It's all manual mode. The comparison I make for DJI versus like FPV, it's like comparing a Tesla with autopilot to like a 1980s Camaro or something like that.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, a lot of people, myself included, really appreciate having good digital video. And there are these small ones that will take digital as well. The price definitely jumps up a little bit, especially with like the goggles and all that. But yeah, so something like this will have the nice clear digital video. That being said, that's still not a GPS thing. And actually, you won't find any racing setup with GPS. It's all going to be manual stuff. So yeah, something like that. You're going to have to piece it together slightly. But basically, you get your goggles that are compatible with Avatar and your radio that's compatible with Express LRS, and you're good to go. So yeah, there is a cheaper option for the Avatar system as well, which is the Recons. And if you're feeling spendy, then there is the Dominators as well. And those are very, very comparable to the DJI stuff that's been around for like the last year or two, or a little more, I guess. So yeah, there is that, and then there's the stuff with DJI built in as well. The racing, the specific racing options are kind of nil with this, depending on how serious you want to do the racing. But yeah, so for indoor stuff, there would be something like that. Yeah, I basically do it. And of course, like there's always just a Nevada as well. If you're wanting to go and fly that style of flying. Yeah, so there's a few different streams you can take. There would be the more serious racing route versus the more general flying route, but yeah.
Cool.